And welcome, everyone. It is Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast, and the host, I guess I could say, of At Family Office and Family Office TV on YouTube. I hope the summer is going well for many of you. As you all know, for me, it's a big transition from my beloved that I founded many years ago, Family Office Association, but I'm incredibly excited about the future and how active I am on really everything that I'm doing in the family office world. And I'm hoping actually by this weekend, earlier than my promise of Tuesday, August 15th, my rebranding of my website, angelorobles.com, will be up. And everything that I'm doing, including Billionaire University and Mastermind, SFO Continuity, which is going to be a global membership organization for a very, very, very limited number of ultra high net worth families and their single family offices, and my more public work on Family Office TV. So it's really an exciting time. Thank you all for being a part of it. Make sure to follow on all those social channels, including LinkedIn, including Rumble, where sometime early September, when I could really let it rip, that will be one of the platforms where I could kind of say what I want, and so could my guest. And I'm Angelo Robles Media on that, on Twitch, and on Instagram. So again, thank you all for your support. I appreciate all your DMs and emails to me over the last couple of weeks. It's greatly appreciative. If you don't subscribe, go and subscribe to really all my social medias, but I would definitely say especially the ones with my most interactive and interview platforms at YouTube, meaning at Family Office and Family Office TV. Today, we have a very special guest. I've been a fan of FAR for a long time. We do have a more limited amount of time than my normal Joe Rogan-esque 2+ hours with a lot of geopolitical and deeper thinkers, but that means I need to be more truncated in terms of my questions, which is probably a good thing. How about that for everyone? The topic today and how it intertwines with family offices is family offices, freedom, sovereignty, governments. Always say that with a negative tone, don't I? And Bitcoin. So we do have a fair amount to discuss in 56 minutes. Our special guest is the one and only Mark Moss, student of history, sound money advocate, freedom maximalist, financial sovereignty, Bitcoin, and national radio show on iHeart and YouTube. Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. What an intro.
And well, thank you.
I know we can. Yeah, man. If we could certainly riff for hours on all those topics. But let's see how much we can get through.
Absolutely. Why don't I start with one that's important to me? Financial freedom, aka self-sovereignty. What does that mean to you?
You know, sovereignty to me means that I can direct my life as I see fit in a direction that leads to my own ends, and I really break that part out separately because, to me, you know, freedom, a lot of people really don't understand what that word is. I like to think about it as like liberty, as F.A. Hayek declared, wrote in his book, Constitution of Liberty, which is free of coercion, freedom from coercion. So you think about like take the jab or lose your job. You were given a choice, but either one of those choices led to their ends, right? I want to always be able to have choices that lead to my own ends. That's what I think about sovereign. And my goal is always to become more and more sovereign. It's a spectrum and try to help other people get there as well.
Excellent. I have a comment, then a question relative to that. And it got me in trouble on some of the more left-leaning platforms, whatever, Instagram and others, when I did a short video that, to me, quote unquote, escaping from the system, having freedom. Don't believe what the masses, the Barbie movie is telling you. Money absolutely does matter. I don't care if you come from nothing. Stop the victim mindset. You have to create businesses. You have to create multiple income streams. Your inner happiness is very, very important, of course. But if you want to have the discipline, if you want to have true freedom, and you don't think that money is a part of that, you are kidding yourself. And to me, I think that bare minimum, is probably $30 million. So I hate to put a financial number on it that makes it a little bit more commercial. I do understand. And that word to you may mean different things to different people. But don't think that having money, owning property, owning income producing assets, having flexibility to travel the world, having multiple passports, yes, it absolutely matters. If you want to call me a capitalist, absolutely. Thank you, by the way, I am. But that's just the reality of it. A question for you, Mark, relative to that. is here in the US as a US citizen. And again, I love the country. I bleed red, white, and blue, and I'm incredibly pro military. I get it. Very, very important. But do we really have true sovereignty as an individual or a family when anywhere we go in the world, anywhere we look to live, if we hold on to our US citizenship, we basically owe the government, the IRS, money?
Well, as I kind of said before, right? Like I believe it's a spectrum. Like nobody's totally 100% sovereign. I mean, unless you live on like some mountaintop and you make your own clothes and you grow your own food and you build your own house. I mean, we all rely on somebody else at some point. So I think it's a spectrum. I mean, you threw out a number of 30 million. I mean, I think you could achieve what I would consider sovereignty for much less than that. But again, it's a spectrum. So depends. I mean, how many passports do you need? How many houses do you need, et cetera. But in regards to, the question specifically about the tax situation, I mean, certainly, being a U.S. citizen, we owe federal taxes no matter where we move for the rest of our lives. And there's only one other very, very tiny, obscure country in Africa that does that. So basically, the U.S. is the only country in the world that does that. In that regards, I mean, you could argue that we're part serf, part slave, sort of a thing, right? I mean, on a sliding scale, if you worked and you never got any income, if 100% of your income was taken by the government, you would be a slave. If you got to keep 100% of your income, I guess you would be a free person. What about if you give up 50%? I mean, where are you at? So that's why I said it's like a spectrum. But I would say to me, it's not so much about the number that I have in the bank, nor is it about the taxes that my government may or may not charge me. It's the ability for me to change that if I want. Right. So I may decide that I don't want to live in the United States because of any number of reasons, including taxation or, pandemic policies, whatever it may be. And if I have the ability, I have the money, I have the assets, I have the, ability, which would be money, assets, passports, et cetera. If I have the ability to move, then I'm still sovereign because now I'm able to direct my life as I see fit. Right. So like, for example, back to, as I said, take the jab or quit your job. Well, haha, joke's on you. I've never had a job. So good job coercing me. Like it doesn't apply, right? But that's what I mean. Like I don't need to make their two choices. I don't operate in that system. Now, yes, back to kind of the question. Yes, I'm a US citizen. So yes, I pay taxes. But I could choose to remove myself from that situation. Now, there's a number of ways you can do that without getting into the weeds. You work with high office individuals. I know really big high office family office consultants that help people go from a citizen to a national and set up complex business trusts offshore. And there's many things you can do to greatly reduce, if not get rid of your tax exposure if you want to go down that road. There's plenty of other legal options, more traditional, I should say, options, using real estate and things like that, where I could write off my income, et cetera, using debt to leverage so I don't pay taxes. So there's a lot of options. And yes, I could even renounce my citizenship and move. But again, just going back to the point of being sovereign allows me to choose. And so I have those choices if I have the ability, the means, et cetera.
In terms of thinking about sovereignty here in the US, and again, I agree with what you said. Again, given my community of single family offices, actually 30 million would be basically a drop in the bucket. So I'm the one who's on kind of the low end of the totem pole there. But I think in our uniqueness of our country, which has a state system, a federal and territories, Puerto Rico, that we may get to a little bit relative to this conversation, it does become a question where to live. And I grew up in greater New York. I love New York. I still love to go to New York City. I'll admit it bounced back probably better than I thought from COVID. I was wrong. I'm wrong a lot. I will give it that. But why do I want to start a business there? Okay, I'm young. I'm going to school. I'm getting out of college. There's a vibrancy. There's lots of young people. I get it. New York, LA. Man, I'm not even talking about San Francisco. That's become a disaster. But if I'm a little bit older, a little more mature, I have optionality. Why am I living in those states, California, New York? Why am I starting a business there when I'm wanted more, being an entrepreneur, being a business person in Florida, in Texas, in Nevada? Everyone knows I love Wyoming, and even states that do have taxes, but I think have the right libertarian mindset, Montana. And again, I guess we could circle to Puerto Rico a little bit, which in theory, depending on your sourced income, would bring your tax bill down a lot.
Yeah. So I can answer this from somebody who lives in California, who lived in Puerto Rico, and owns a property in Texas and used to live in Texas. So
Wow.
I can approach it from all three of those levels. And what I would say is the answer is always coming back to what problem am I trying to solve? So this is a question that doesn't have a one size fits all answer. People ask me all the time, where would I go? Well, I don't know. What are you trying to optimize for? So, for example, yes, California has a very restrictive environment for creating businesses. Obviously, the taxation is the highest in the nation, et cetera. But if I wanted to start a tech business, the chance of me building a very quick and fast growing and successful tech business in Silicon Valley is way higher than it would be in Kansas or Wyoming or Texas. So, I mean, maybe Austin's starting to catch up, right? Which a lot of people are moving to Austin. But like, I might say, hey, yes, I'm going to pay way more tax, but my business is going to grow way faster. And so it's still worth it for me. Hypothetically, I don't know. Now, maybe you're not building a tech business. I don't know. Maybe you're building a manufacturing business. Well, if you're building a manufacturing business, you certainly shouldn't be in California. The land's too expensive, right? So it depends on what problem you're trying to solve for. And the reason why I start with that specifically is because as somebody who's moved to Puerto Rico, I've built complex tax strategies, thought about moving full-time to Texas, all these things. Again, what problem am I trying to solve? So I'm trying to reduce my taxes. Why? Well, because I want to keep more money. Okay, so what I'm really saying is I just want more money to invest or spend. Yes. Well, there's two sides. That's an equation. There's a numerator and denominator. So there's the income and there's the tax. What if my taxes go up, but my income goes up by even more? So a lot of people spend a lot of time, effort, energy to build complex tax saving programs or move out of the state or the country. And if they would just take that same amount of time, effort, energy and put it into their business, could they just offset that? So those are a couple of things that I think about. Other things that I think about are the lifestyle. So I grew up in Southern California. Southern California is a very unique place, and not everybody's like me. Most people are not. But I wanted to be a pro surfer and a pro snowboarder and a pro dirt bike racer, and I didn't become any of those things. But what I did do is I built a career that allowed me to still do those things as if I was. So I have kids, and any chance we get, we're hopping on a plane, we're going somewhere in the world, we're catching some good waves. In the winter, we went out to Wyoming this year to Jackson Hole. We did some heli skiing. And I like to do those things. But here in Southern California, I live on the beach. I can surf every day. 2 hours from my house, I go snowboarding with my kids all winter. I have all these open deserts. I go take my dirt bike out every single weekend. From my house, I ride the mountains on my mountain bike. And there's nowhere else in the world I can do that. So I did move to Puerto Rico, and that was great. I dropped my taxes. That was awesome. But I dropped my taxes, and all of a sudden I can't snowboard or ride my mountain bike or ride my dirt bike. And I'm like, so I worked really hard to build a business that allows me to have the lifestyle that I want. And then I just moved and got rid of my whole lifestyle. Why would I do that? And so there's a lot of things to consider here. And so it's just not a one size fits all answer, but things being equal. So I am sort of at this crossroads where I'm asking myself the same situation. So I coach businesses. One of the businesses that I'm coaching has been blowing up. They want me to come on board and take a more strategic role, a big equity piece in the business. And the goal would be to scale this business in 36 months and have a, $100 million plus exit. And the question that we're debating right now is if this is the goal that we think is realistic, which I think it is, and we could scale this business to 100 million in 3 years, why would I want to build that in California knowing I'd have to give up half of the money? Would it be better just to go build that business in one of these other states that you mentioned, a no state tax state, or even go to Puerto Rico and start the business, right? And so there's different things for different people in different times with different considerations. And so that's the way I think about it. But if you're just the average person and you go to the big box stores on the weekends and you stay at home and you eat, you cook at home every day, I mean, you can pretty much live in suburbia anywhere in the world. And if that's the case, then, I would probably choose, pro freedom, low taxes, but also climate. And that's the other thing. Like Southern California, yes, we have Gavin Newsom, and that's a nightmare. And yes, we have high taxes.
Yes, it is.
But yes, we have high taxes, but like, oh my gosh, like the weather is amazing. Like it rains like 10 days a year. We have no bugs here, no mosquitoes. Like,
but a lot of us like Four Seasons, Mark.
Well, right. And so then maybe
Wyoming has its charms.
And so maybe, and I do too, but my wife hates the snow. So that would be the surest way to lose half my wealth if I wanted to move to the snow. She's not going for that. And so, like, the way that I look at it, and kind of going back to like, what am I trying to optimize for? There's income and there's expenses, taxes being the expenses side. And like, you know, I could eat top ramen every day. When I was 19 years old, I ate top ramen quite a bit. I could eat, Burger King every day, but I don't. I eat steak every single day. Every single day, I'm pretty much a carnivore. And what am I trying to say? I could make my food as cheap as I possibly could, but why? I eat at nice restaurants. And so, like, yes, I could move to Texas and save 10%, but I'd just rather pay 10% more and live in heaven.
And again, like you said, you could simply, boy, shockingly, a solution to a lot of problems. Again, Mr. Capitalist here, make more money.
Make more money.
that's, that's the reality of it. Others, again, I'm trying to be, I wouldn't say a little antagonist to Mark, but to make the conversation a little quicker, a little bit spicy. Sometimes you got to do a little bit of that because we have a little bit more of a limited amount of time. There is a question that came in, probably the last question on this topic. It's a good one. Maybe asked by Anna, maybe living in Dubai would be sovereign. Well, if you're a U.S. citizen, again, the IRS is going to follow you everywhere. But broadly, Dubai has many, many things that are positive. If you have money, again, if you have money,
Yeah, it's always that.
It is clean. It is beautiful. It is beyond safe. There are very talented people there. If you're successful in the world of finance, I think you could do well. Do I think as a uber rich person, like my family offices that I deal with, you should probably consider having a residence, bank, and some resources there. You cannot be a citizen, so no passport. That's one drawback. And geez, I hate to say this, but given that I am paranoid about government, man, it checks the box on a lot of good things. But the fact that it's a kingdom and the king decides, freeze that bank account, make that person, I don't know, get them in trouble or something worse. But on Rumble, I would mention it, but I'm not going to mention it here. At the back of my mind, that bothers me. I don't think I could ever, as a Westerner, make it what I would deem to be a primary location. Mark, any feedback?
Well, I mean, I think that's a very linear black and white question that we don't need to ask. And I think it exposes a lot of wrong think that people have, right? We're not trees, man. We can move anytime we want. I can be in multiple jurisdictions at once. I have a house in California. I also have a ranch with 5 cows and goats in Texas. So if something happened in California, I can just go to my ranch in Texas. I can hunker down with my homies there with my guns, and we can protect and eat steak every day. If California, if the U.S.
Don't bring those guns to California.
if the U.S. goes off the rails, well, I have a house in Mexico. I'll go to my house in Mexico. It's on the beach there too. If Mexico goes off the rails, I'll go down to El Salvador, where I also have a community. So like,
those are some of the right ways of thinking. You're correct.
And so like when you say, should I go to Dubai? Sure, go to Dubai. But if they do these things I don't like, then do I have the ability to move somewhere else? And so the way that I think about it is the future seems to be more uncertain than I've seen it in my life. Obviously, if you live in the Middle East or Syria, Ukraine, life has always been uncertain for you. But as an American, life seems to be very uncertain for me at this point. The G20 is talking about putting a vaccine passport system in. We have, CBDCs. Most countries are trying to rush CBDCs in.
That question is coming.
And so there's a lot of things that are going to happen. And I don't know exactly when or how. And so the way that we beat uncertainty is with optionality. The more options I give myself, the more I'm equipped to handle with any uncertainty that may come my way. And so, sure, Dubai is great for lots of reasons. For me, I wouldn't go to Dubai for one main reason. They don't have waves. I'm a surfer.
But they could probably create them. They're pretty good at that.
Yeah, they actually do have a wave pool there. But the reason why I say that, which is one, it's true, but two, it's because everybody's looking to optimize for something different. I would rather, and Dubai is beautiful and it's safe and it's clean and it is all those things that you said. There's high quality people there. All those things you said are true. But for me, I rate waves higher. I'd rather live in El Salvador and surf. And so,
and Bitcoin friendly may not hurt for you, Mark.
Yeah, and it's Bitcoin friendly. And so the reason why I kind of say that is just because to highlight the fact that we're all trying to optimize for different things, and we should optimize for different things. Like I love Mexico, mainland Mexico on the Pacific coast is where I like to go because there's great waves. But if you don't like waves, then you want to go to the east coast of Mexico, like Cancun.
Yeah.
Like we're both in Mexico. I want to be on one coast, you want to be on the other, just because of what we're trying to optimize for. And so I just want to highlight that. But then again, back to that kind of questioning. not to say that that person has that line of questioning, but we're not trees. We can move at any time. Let's think about what we're optimizing for. And if we go somewhere, and so like, for example, I was in Puerto Rico, they put in a whole vaccine mandate on the island. And where I was over on the west side of the island was very rural, so they didn't really enforce it. No big deal. If I went to the city, then you had to deal with it. You couldn't really go anywhere. But where I was, it was rural, no big deal. But in December of that year of 2021, they changed that, and they really started enforcing and cracking it down to the point where my family and I couldn't go anywhere. Okay, well then I left. That's why I left Puerto Rico.
Right.
And so, and that's an example of what I'm talking about, having the ability to just go somewhere. And to your point, money solves that.
Yes, and I was going to say one, I love that word optionality. I totally agree. The flexibility that you're talking about, let's be rather blunt. Okay, maybe 30 million is more than enough, but it does take money. I completely agree. You should probably have 5 to 6 different passports, keep them diverse around the world, have multiple bank accounts, have multiple network of powerful relationships. And you mentioned Mexico. I think Mexico is underrated. I love Mexico as well. So again, and I am doing a topic on this called Coming From America. That's actually going to be on another platform or on the host, but they'll allow me to repurpose it and put it up on my platforms come early September. And for billionaires, this subject is a big focus of what I do on my disaster prep for billionaire platform program, masterclass and consulting. I am going to go round robin all over the place, Mark. Here we go. Climate change. Well, I don't know. Does it nuclear power solve a hell of a lot of problems?
So, yes and no. Okay, so first of all, yes, right? I mean, I believe that we should be pushing to nuclear like really, really fast. And there's a lot of reasons why, but energy density being the main one, right? So like how many pounds of coal versus how many barrels of oil. So oil is more energy dense, natural gas is more energy dense, but uranium is the most. So like with this much uranium, I could power like, all of Los Angeles. Is like pretty cool. So we should certainly do that. And to I think the point that you're asking with climate change is that it's also zero emissions. The reason why I sort of laugh about that is because I think that's sort of ridiculous to think that emissions is the lever, to think that we can control the thermostat of the world by changing the CO2 level is just absolutely absurd to me. It's also absurd because factually, we see that it's not the case. So, for example, the IPCC, which puts out the reports that everybody runs off of, said that if left unchecked, the temperature of the world will increase by, was it 1.4 degrees, 1.2 degrees Celsius over the next 100 years. And then what happens is then all the people extrapolate from that will be catastrophic, and the whole world is dead at that point, right? But where do they come up with that calculation or that assumption? Because per the IPCC, the world has increased by that same amount of temperature in the last 120 years. And over the last 120 years, we've seen human life expectancy like triple. We've seen wealth quadruple. We now have more food than we've ever had in the history of humanity. And so all the evidence shows that when the world warmed up, things got better. So if it warms up a little bit more, all of a sudden everybody dies. And so like, it's just a bunch of hysteria, a bunch of recklessness. Plus, I think the reporting is wrong anyway. We can see that the weather moves in cycles, and right now we're actually in a cooling trend. All of human history is really a record of people being cold and hungry. That's really what human history is. People look at like Game of Thrones and think how cool that was. Like, no. That was a world full of hardship. Everyone was cold. Everybody was hungry. Everybody was starving. People would sell their kids, eat their kids, whatever they had to do. It was bad. And so today we have warmth, right? As humans, without clothes, like we have to live in the tropics. Like we can't live in the cold. So anyway, I think that's ridiculous to think that assumption. But to answer your question, yes, nuclear is super important. I think we need it. It doesn't replace fossil fuels. Oil is needed to make petrochemicals. So we don't have shoes or tires or most of our cleaners or even pharmaceuticals without oil. So nuclear will certainly augment the amount of electricity that we have. And I think we should. I think we've proven it's pretty safe. We can see that, from Chernobyl all the way through Fukushima, all the nuclear problems that we've had, depending on where you get your data, but based off of the main leading sources, we've seen less than a few hundred people die. Total between all the accidents. None died in Fukushima. How many people die in the oil field every day? How many people die digging cobalt out of the ground in Africa every single day? And so really it's been pretty safe. We know the Navy's been running nuclear subs since the 60s and never had a single accident. And so, like, it seems to be pretty safe. We did see in Georgia, like 2 weeks ago, the first U.S. nuclear reactor came online after several decades. China's ramping them up as fast as they can, and we can see the tale of two cities. I mean, just look at France and look at Germany. France has 70% of electricity coming from nuclear. Germany shut all theirs off, and now Germany is forced to deindustrialize. I mean, it's just insane. So, yes, I do believe nuclear is important into the future.
No disagreements there, Mark. I'm going to put on my usual Dr. Doom attitude. Hard times ahead. Where do I start? A little bit. We have a wicked deficit. I don't see how that is just magically going to disappear. It's going to grow. We have political bifurcation. We have what I'm going to deem, we're going to get a little more into politics shortly, but effectively a cold civil war. On a little bit more lighter note, we have an inverted yield curve, where short-term treasuries, very short-term, are actually paying pretty darn good relative to mid or long-term. That usually, I would say practically always, given a little bit of a lag, is also an indicator of trying times ahead. I guess I'm trying to indirectly give you a quasi-political, geopolitical, and economic question. What would you say?
There's always hard times ahead. Allstate did a research study on car accidents, and a car accident happens every 6 minutes. So there's always a crash coming. But what I would say is that, problems create opportunities. And so you can look at the glass half full or glass half empty. To all those things that you said, specifically, we can talk about like the debt. We'll talk about that for a second. So, I believe, like a lot of other people, Ray Dalio as well, that we're in like the end of this like 80-year financial cycle. And really, I call it a financial revolution cycle where the financial system has to be reset. About 80 years ago, the whole world went into a new monetary system called the Bretton Woods Agreement, Bretton Woods system. And so we're there. And what happened is we have, to the point that you brought up, an unsustainable debt level. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Treasury put out a report in 2021 called the unsustainable path. And basically they showed that the amount of debt is growing so fast, it's unsustainable. There's just no way forward. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office, projects that debt's going to be over 50 trillion by the end of the decade. And so that's a big problem. And to your point, it's an unsustainable path. Now, does that mean that there's imminent death? Like the whole world's going to melt down? Like, certainly not. I mean, look at Japan. They're 240% debt to GDP, and they seem to be just getting along just okay. Now, it's not great. And as a sound money advocate, I don't advocate for that at all. It's a massive problem that's causing all types of problems and distortions through not just the economy, but society as well. So it's a big problem. But does it mean there's certain impending death coming? And the answer to me is no. I think what most people that I really respect, guys like Harry Dent or Peter Schiff, like they're right on their data. They're wrong on their assumptions, and they fail to take into account how many magic tricks the Fed has up their sleeve.
Yeah, they could keep on printing more money. But eventually, depending on certain factors, that may come home to roost.
No, it will 100%. 100% it will come home to roost. But is that in 6 months, 1 year, or 10 years? I mean, Peter Schiff and Harry Dent have been calling for this for a decade, and it hasn't.
Something about those Puerto Rican economists, Mark. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I respect
Harry are friends, and I know they're down there.
I respect him. I've read 5 of Harry Dent's books. I think his research is amazing, and I think he's right on his data. He's wrong on the assumptions. And I'm sorry, Harry. But I don't have to say that. He has been wrong. He's been calling for a crash for the last several years. And eventually he'll be right because, yes, there is one coming. And I'm not saying things are good by any means. The amount of debt that we're going into is unsustainable. And so what's going to happen? I'll give you kind of my prediction of how things go. I think we enter a period of sort of like a stagflation, right? We're going to see inflation going higher and GDP growth is going to continue to grind slower. The IMF put out a white paper in 2015 called Liquidation of Government Debt. And in that, they lay out a playbook called financial repression. Financial repression has been used by the U.S. in the 40s. It was used by Israel in the 80s, and it's most likely going to be used by the U.S. again. This is my probable case of where things go. And they have to, as the IMF paper said, liquidation of government debt, which is financial repression is keeping inflation high and bond yields low. So they inflate away the debt. You see, because debt to GDP is an equation, numerator and denominator. If I can't bring the debt down, I can bring the GDP up, right? Because what we want right now, we're at 120% debt to GDP. They want to get it back down to 80 or 50% debt to GDP. Well, if we can't get the debt down, can we get the GDP to go up? Well, GDP goes up when inflation goes up. When the price of goods and services go up, then the GDP goes up, right? And so, like in Israel, for example, they saw like 3 years of double and triple digit inflation, massive inflation. And so I think that's the path for the US. I've been very vocal to say that I think this is some of the lowest inflation we'll see for the decade. And nothing goes up and down in a straight line. So it goes up and down, up and down. But really, like we saw in the 40s and even the 70s a little bit, is inflation comes in waves. And I think I think inflation bottomed and we're about to see another wave of inflation. That should probably throw the markets for a tailspin. And so I think this financial repression is the probable case. Like I said, it was in the 40s. And then what happens? Well, when you have high inflation and low yields, what happens that leads to like a speculative attack. Okay. Because now, if we're in that period, what do? Well, you go borrow as much money as you can at those low rates because inflation is going to inflate away your debt. So now I'm going to borrow as much money as I can to buy houses or whatever I can to lever up. That's the play. But then the government doesn't like that because that just exaggerates the system. So then the next step, which every nation or empire goes through, is capital controls. So now we have to control the flow of capital because otherwise we're having this speculative attack. People are borrowing, they're investing. And so then the liquidity starts drying up. We start seeing that you can or cannot invest into certain types of assets, move certain types of money. We see price fixing, price controls, rent controls, things like that to try to keep that inflation down, right? Because inflation's raging. So they're trying everything they can to try to keep it down. And this is where it's going. And we see it happening all over the world today. Argentina, right? I mean, even the Netherlands. I was a couple weeks ago, I was at a mastermind in Spain and with a big international group, and there was a lot of e-commerce retailers there. And there's several people there from like the Netherlands, and they sell like fitness equipment all over Europe, right? Because Europe's sort of like the United States, just whatever. But they're not able to really scale their business because the government doesn't allow them to spend more than a certain amount of money out of the country. So they're trying to buy equipment from other countries to sell because they sell fitness equipment, but they can't because the government wants to control the money. The team that put that event together was from Argentina. In Argentina, the official government reported exchange rate is like 250 to 1, to the US dollar. This was as of a few weeks ago. Don't quote me on it. I didn't look at it today, but roughly 250 to 1. But that's the official rate, but you can only do like $300 exchange on that. The black market, it's like 550 to 1. Well, they were in Spain. The team was from Argentina, from Spain. If they spend more than like $300 on their credit card as they're traveling, then they're going to be automatically exchanged at like a 750 to 1. So we see this happening all over the world. It's happening right now today. It happened in the United States in 1940. It's the end result of every empire. And that's what I think is the most probable case.
Yeah, I mean, we appear to be heading into, and probably one of my questions, if we had a second hour, would have been a multipolarity world, the challenge to the US dollar, the grave challenges looking forward ahead that I see on the horizon, but I'm going to have to leave some of them on the cutting room floor. But one I think the audience wants to hear about, you hinted at it a little while ago, is how in the US can we avoid, it seems impossible, but I hope you could give me hope, avoid a central bank digital currency, because they're going to make it enticing. You get $1,000 credit, Mr. Joe Blow. $1,000, that's a lot of money. It's wickedly efficient. Your life will be more efficient. It'll be easier. And that's going to turn into programmable money, where the government is basically controlling your interest rates, could freeze your wallet. God knows they don't like what you say. Who knows what's next? There is no secret. And God forbid, climate change. You can't have more than 2 pounds of meat a month, no matter who you are, unless you own a farm. We're going to close you down. I just can't see a way out of it, but maybe you could give me some hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the plan. Every nation's moving towards that. It's just a matter of time. But over what time frame? So I can tell you from secondhand knowledge, somebody that I've been coaching for the last year and a half, they're a very high-level consultant, and they consult with the U.S. Treasury. In February, they went down and met with the Treasury, and the Treasury is building 3 new facilities to print physical dollars. And he said, "What are you
Wow.
doing? I thought we're all going to digital money." He's like, "Oh no, oh no, dollars have never been in more demand. We can't keep up with it. We're printing more dollars than we can put our hands in, or we can keep up with." Now they're building them next to airports, and the money's going right onto planes and leaving the country. But per the Treasury, secondhand knowledge, like I said, this directly from someone I coach, they're ramping up to print even more dollars. But eventually, it's coming. We know that's the end result because that's the final piece of the puzzle. You see, all freedom hinges on the freedom to transact. If you take my way ability to transact, all my freedoms, freedom of speech, assembly, all that goes away. So that's the ultimate plan. In the US specifically, I think the US might be one of the last nations to move to that, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, we have this pesky document they hate called the Constitution. Second of all, American people still have guns. But really, it comes down to the US dollar is already the most dominant, and the US dollar backed stable coins are also the most dominant.
True.
So all over the world, all of these countries I mentioned in Venezuela and Argentina and Lebanon and Turkey and whatever, they're all using US dollar stable coins right now. So the dollar's already scaled globally. We have the US, the euro dollar market, but now we have the stable coin market. And so while the rest of the world is trying to push the CBDCs so they can have a digital currency, they all think that that people, you and I, we want a digital currency. So they're all rushing to roll one out. But the US already has one. We already have the US dollar stablecoins. We saw just this week PayPal announced they're going to launch a stablecoin now. So PayPal is going to have their own coin. And so I think for those couple of reasons, like I said, the political appetite, we've seen already multiple states in the US, Florida, North Carolina, Texas, putting laws in place to prevent any CBDCs from coming. So while that's certainly what some people want, I think in the US, it's going to be much slower for all of those reasons. The rest of the world, though, yeah, certainly it's going to come faster. And yes, people will be enticed into it. And to be honest with you, if someone offers me $1,000 to download an app and use a CBDC, I'll take it too. Why wouldn't I? I'll take free money. Of course. Of course I will. Why wouldn't I?
You're contributing to the problem, Mark, but I get it. Free money is free money.
Right. So what I'm saying is, yes, everyone's going to move into that. And so a couple ways they could usher that in would be certainly, hey, we'll send out the STIMI, but to get the STIMI, you have to, download CBDC.
Yes, that's how you do
it. Or hey, the bank's crashed, and to get your money from FDIC.
Oh, that won't happen.
Yeah, then to get your money from FDIC, you have to. So there's a lot of ins there potentially, but I think ultimately it just goes back to what we started the conversation and really the whole frame of this conversation, which is being sovereign and giving myself options. And there's a couple of things that people need to understand is that what the central banks don't understand, specifically the BIS, because they just put out this big report about CBDCs. What they don't understand is they say that the cryptocurrency has failed, and because money can only be issued by a trusted issuer like a central bank. Well, first of all, no one trusts the central banks. But you see, what these people think is they think money, or currency, I should say, for those gold bugs out there, what we consider money, but currency today is a government good, but that's not true. You and I create wealth and we trade. Now, you don't want my cow, so we'll trade with a medium of exchange. You and I decide what that medium exchange is. Hey, man, I want your cow. If I come over and build you a fence at your house, would you give me the cow? Sure. So I just traded you my labor. Mm-hmm. Hey, I have 3 iPhones right here that I'm not using. Would you take my 3 iPhones? Yes. And so you and I decide what money is. And so that's what the government has completely wrong, which is why it will fail. We know this to be true. People say, oh, but the military backs it. But how did the military back it in Venezuela when money literally littered the streets and people didn't pick it up? When in Zimbabwe, in these countries, they'd rather just trade batteries for water. They ain't using that currency. And so I think what the government has wrong is certainly they could push a CBDC in place, certainly. And certainly they could make us pay our taxes in that. But they can't tell us what we use as money. You and I decide what we want to use as money. And so we have Bitcoin also, which I believe is the tool that we have to beat that. So while I see that as almost inevitable, certain countries will be faster than others. Obviously, communist China already rolled theirs out. Russia's working on rolling one out. I think the U.S. will probably be the last. Yes, I think people will adopt it if they give them free money. I will too. But I think that it will fail because you and I decide what money is. Nobody wants to use surveillance coin. We'll use freedom coin. Bitcoin.
Yeah, we were going to get to that coin.
and we'll use other means. We'll trade other things that we deem to be mediums of exchange. And so I ultimately believe it fails, but it is scary and it is coming.
Well, Mark, this is not going to be easy for both of us, but in the remaining 16, 17 minutes, I'm going to try to let's go rapid fire on 10 questions, and I'll leave my other 68 on the floor.
All right, let's do it.
And again, you're heading in the right direction in your comment to what my questions are going to be, some of the ones coming up. Do we place more money in Bitcoin and gold, so called off the grid, assuming what I noted about programmable money, people wanting freedom and sovereignty? Know the audience, in case you're wondering, I've done hours with Michael Saylor, with Breedlove, and a whole bunch. I'm not going to have the time to get into with Mark. How private is Bitcoin? Did the US government get involved? Is there a shutdown switch? Do they basically know everything that you're doing? And could you make, or could more than 21 million? I don't have time for that. So we'll just go into the.
Let me just say all of those things are false. So
okay.
we know there's no backdoor.
We
know it. We know it wasn't given by the state. And the reason why we know that is Bitcoin is what we call trustless. We say, don't trust, but verify. What does that mean? All the code is open source. There's no proprietary codes that might have some backdoor in there that we don't know what there is. Now, every other cryptocurrency does have that. Bitcoin doesn't. It's open source code. Everybody can look at the data. I personally, on a friend level, know many of the Bitcoin core developers. There's no backdoors there. So we don't have to worry about any of that. Hypothetically, even if the NSA or whatever government body thinks gave it to us, even if they did, it doesn't matter because it's open source now. So now,
you don't think it funky what happened to Hal Finney? Probably something we shouldn't talk about on YouTube.
I mean, there's lots of funky things that happen all over the world, at many different times. But I'm just saying, like, because it's open source code, we don't have to worry about that. And we use things all the day, every day that we don't know who invented them. Like, who invented the wheel? I don't know, but I drive around them every day, right? Like,
I'm gonna have to steal that one from you. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. So, in regards to that, and as far as like, could they create more? I mean, not really. I mean, anyone can make a copy of Bitcoin. So I can make Mark's coin, just like I can make a copy of Twitter and call it Mark's Twitter, and I can make a copy of Facebook called Mark's Facebook. Ain't no one going to use Mark's Facebook. So I can make a copy of Bitcoin and call it Mark's coin. No one's going to use it. So if I want to have 41 million instead of 21, I make a copy. It's called forking it. It's happened many times. There's dozens and dozens of forks, maybe more, of Bitcoin. And I can fork Bitcoin and say, I have 41 million. Doesn't mean anyone's going to use it. I can also make a photocopy of the Mona Lisa. Doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it. But anyway, sorry, I know you didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. What was the question that you did want to ask?
Basically, it was kind of pro Bitcoin and gold. It was basically stating to have a level of freedom, self-sovereignty, and some of the concerns that you mentioned relative to the dollar, currency in general, and quote unquote government involvement. Basically, how about art? How about gold? How about Bitcoin? Now, again, for the super rich, again, an advantage. They buy art, you put it in Switzerland, Freeport zones. But I guess I do wonder how off the grid is really much of that. If the US government puts all their resources wanting to know everything about Mark Moss and his Bitcoin, I'm going to assume they'll find out.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we could discuss that. We won't waste a lot of time on it because I'm going to get to the answer that really matters. And I'm going to say, so what? So what? So they know I have it. Okay, cool. What are you going to do? Come and take it. Good luck, right? Bitcoin is stored cryptographically. That means I have a set of cryptographic keys that allow me to access my Bitcoin. I can know 12 words in my head. What are you going to do? Hang me on my toes and tickle me to death? Like, good luck. Like, I can set up with multi-sig wallet. So I have 3 keys around the world. Like, you can't get to my 3 keys. Like, you can't get it. And you have to think about this like realistically, okay? The US government stole gold in 1933 from everybody, right? They made it illegal. Now, the reason they were able to do that is because all the gold was in the bank. So they did a bank holiday. When they opened the bank back up, you couldn't get your gold out. If they had to go back in 1933, if they had to go out on, around the country, farm to farm to farm, walking up on ranchers' property to steal their gold for them, how do you think that would have gone?
They would have had a rifle in their face.
They would have had a rifle in their face. Every single house they would have gone to, it never would have worked because the return, we think about returns on investment, right? Returns on ROI. There's a return on violence. For the amount of violence they would have to go put forward to try to extract gold, the return would be too high. It wouldn't be worth it. But if I can just close the banks down for a week, open the banks, and I have it, that's easy. So that would be if I went farm to farm to farm and I somehow got past the rifles, and then I somehow made him show me where he buried the gold. And it wasn't like a fake gold hole where he had 2 coins, but I had to get the whole stash. Maybe I could have gotten it, right? Now imagine that with Bitcoin. So now you're going to have to go from house to house to house, and you're going to have to torture everybody to give you their 12 words. Maybe they're under duress. They can't remember the words. Like, the return on violence is too high. So I just think the reality, everything in the world is possible. But in the world of probabilities, I don't see that as being probable, not by more than a couple percentage points. Now, some of the things they're doing, like in Europe, for example, they're talking about potentially putting laws into place that would prevent you from doing self-custody. So that means they want all the Bitcoin in a bank. Then they could squeeze it just like they did gold, right? So if they were to pass some laws like that, which now says it's illegal to custody your own Bitcoin, and people put it in the bank, then they could seize it that way. That would be easy to do, I suppose. But what's happening is that, I mean, there's a lot of different vectors to talk about this, but what we're witnessing is, okay, so when you look back through thousands of years of history, what changes the world over and over and over and over is always technology. Because technology changes the way that we communicate, the way that we organize. And so then it changes our social structures, our political structure. Everything changes because of that. Let me give you a couple examples. So up to about 1000 BC or AD, we had armies and wars and all that happened. And, you know, the Egyptians in the Bible rode chariots, and they had their horses with chariots. And so the Romans would get off their horses and they would fight. But then there was a new piece of technology that was invented called a stirrup. And that stirrup allowed for a knight to get on a horse with his armor and allowed him to fight from the horse. Now, that piece of technology changed the world, because now it allowed power to centralize. And then we had the feudal system, where we had a king, we had the knights, and the knights could control hundreds of peasants at a time. Okay.
True.
So that piece of technology created mass centralization of power. But then in 1500, 500 years later, we had the gunpowder revolution. And now a serf with a gun could take out hundreds of knights, and that led us back into a decentralized world. Okay. So it's important to understand this. So the reason why I say this is because then in the late 1700s, we had the Industrial Revolution, and that took people from the farms and the cottages and put them into cities and into factories, massive centralization. And for the last 250 years, there's a pendulum that swings on a 250-year time frame. So the last 250 years, we've been moving back to centralization. And what we saw, so there's been 5 technological revolutions. In 1908, Henry Ford created the automobile, but what he also really created was mass production. And this is a very important piece to understand. He created mass production. So we had these massive assembly lines. And in order to manage the masses, they had to come up with a management style to manage everybody like a cog in a wheel. This is also what created this massive middle class that we have. So you and I, you're way smarter than me, but on the assembly line, we do the same work. I put the cog on, you put the cog on, right? So it allowed the dumb people to be on the same plane as the smart people. So that created this massive middle class. But more importantly, what I want to talk about is it created this management structure where we manage everybody like a cog in the wheel. And then when we had these mass management structures for the mass people, we created a government structure to manage the masses. Okay. But today, we're not in the industrial age anymore. We're in the information age. Today, we no longer have massive manufacturing in the United States. Today, we have digital nomads like you working from your laptop and me working from my laptop. Like now we have little businesses. They're all internet. And so the government structure that we have today is no longer compatible with the world that we live in. And that's part of this power struggle that you see going on, which you want to kind of probably jump into next if we have time. But a lot of this division that we're seeing, the continued crackdowns of the government is because there's this power struggle where the government is obsolete. They're obsolete. In the current structure they have today, it's no longer compatible. So back to the point that I was going to talk about. So in the ECB in Europe, they're trying to pass this law on cryptocurrency where you can't custody it yourself. They want to make it where you can't have 3D gun schematics. They want to XYZ. Really? Okay. So you're telling me that I can't know 12 words in my head? Like you're going to pass a law that I don't know 12 words? No, but seriously, like that's what it comes down to. I can store my Bitcoin by knowing 12 words: monkey, wrench, pipe, banana, wave. And like all of a sudden I store. So imagine you laughed. Imagine if they tried to pass that law. How irrelevant and how incompetent does the government look? Okay, you passed a law. I can't know 12 words. So we have to lose all human language? Like, and so this is the world that we're going into. It's just not compatible anymore. And this is why the world is so crazy. This is why they fail. And this is why Bitcoin succeeds.
That was one of the best 5-minute history lessons that I've actually ever heard, Mark. You're really good. And I'm going to probably take that one from you as well. So
Go
thank you.
ahead, share
I
it.
will give you proper credit once in a while.
Okay.
Uh, okay, 9 minutes. US elections 2024. What do you think? Which I get it. I know you're going to be a gentleman and say probably the opposite's going to happen. But what do you think is going to happen? We obviously have Trump, the issues surrounding him. Biden, I wouldn't know where to start with the issues surrounding him. It's a mile long. RFK Jr., the mayor of Miami. Who am I leaving out? Vivek. There's
Well,
a whole bunch.
I like Vivek. If I had to guess, unfortunately, I'm pessimistic on a free and fair election. So, um, unfortunately, I don't think we have a free and fair election anymore. And we probably never did. There's always been fraud and manipulation in elections. I think it's reached a level that is just beyond compare at this point, though. And so, unfortunately, because of that, my guess is it's it's either going to be Biden or whoever the DNC puts in his place, potentially Gavin Newsom. And I hate to say that; it scares me to say that, but unfortunately, I think that's what it is. I like RFK, and I hosted the Twitter Spaces with him like 2 weeks ago. I've got to go to 2 of his dinners, so we've got to spend quite a bit of time together. I've voted Republican my whole life, and I don't like to assign myself to any party. I'd probably be an independent if I had to choose, but I've always voted Republican. But RFK is someone I would vote for. He's a Democrat. And I think it's because now we're starting to see that it's no longer Republican and Democrat. It's no longer left and right. It's we the people versus the government at this point. And so I like RFK. And I would say that if we had a free and fair election, RFK would stomp Biden all day long. Everybody would so I think he would win. I don't know what's going to happen with Trump. I wish Trump would just stand down. I think that would be for the greater good for everybody. Just because there's so many people that will never vote for Trump, just won't. And they would probably vote for a DeSantis, or they'd vote for a Vivek, or they'd vote for an RFK. And so if he would just stand down, I think we'd have a better chance, potentially. But obviously they got, what they have 70 indictments against him now. They're trying to get him for jaywalking and parking tickets and not kissing his mom and who knows what. They'll probably get him for something. It's a sad state for the United States, banana republic at this point. So probably Trump goes down and the Democrats win somehow. That would be my prediction at this point. And
Okay.
not one I'm happy to make.
I know there would be follow-up in our limited amount of time. There also are some comments, questions coming in. Mark has a hard stop in about 5 or 6 minutes. I may stay on and address from my perspective, which arguably is somewhat ignorant, but I will try and maybe address some of your questions. In the meantime,
I can try and stay on a few more minutes if we need to, but
okay. Well,
I see one of the questions here, underestimating the Marxists and others who are currently in control.
And that is a good one, I think, by the way.
So Nico, respectfully, I wrote a book. So let me just give a shameless plug. I wrote a book called The Uncommunist Manifesto. Check it out on Amazon. Normally I have a copy sitting right here. I don't have it. So I wrote a book called The Uncommunist Manifesto. It's a bestseller. It's about an hour read. It's a booklet. Shameless plug. I highly advise reading it. So I don't underestimate the Marxists. I know them very well. I've done lots of research and written a book about it. So I'm certainly not underestimating them. So I'm not sure in which way you're saying that I'm underestimating them. I believe I see the enemy very clearly. So anyway, Nico, I guess maybe you'd open up a question as to how I'm underestimating.
If I could expand upon the question a little bit from my perspective. You could argue there may be several factions, the WEF and what's going on there. And we look at what happened in Germany and post that and the dissemination of people and resources in this country from what some people may call a fascist side, comparative to more from Russia and the Marxist and communistic side. Could I make the point that Capital and Wall Street is probably deemed to be more, quote unquote, on the right, and Hollywood and the dissemination of media and information appears to be more aligned on the left? I mean, for me to do a comment review on the Barbie movie and get more responses than I ever got before, admittingly on TikTok and Instagram, which will skew to an audience that is not going to like what I have to say about Barbie, arguably, I called it a psyop. It was a psyop from the extreme left to demasculinize men and to basically, I mean, I could go on and on about this subject. I'm probably getting in enough trouble on YouTube.
Right, but I agree. But I agree with all that. I mean, I see all
Well,
that.
thank you. Someone does.
So I don't know what I'm underestimating. And just to your sort of
Well,
global.
he's probably saying that they're winning. And by you saying a Democratic president that is very different than the Democrats 20, 30 years ago is probably going to win, is going to start a snowball of that trend. If you're saying that and demographics are not helping those on the right, what's going to happen in 4, 8, or 12 years when AOC becomes president? What's going to happen to unrealized capital gains? It's probably going to start to be taxed.
Yeah. So, first of all, let me respond to the Game of Thrones situation. So this is something I talk about all the time. If when I was a kid, my parents played a game called Risk, a board game, right? And so you're like trying to take over the world, right? If you look at the world from a game perspective, yes, there are many warring factions. People that don't like Bitcoin say, oh, they will never they will never let Bitcoin succeed because they want to control money, right? Well, who are they? You mean Jamie Dimon, the New York Fed, doesn't want to give up control to the ECB? Oh, the ECB doesn't give up control to the PBOC? Oh, the PBOC not to the BOJ? Like, who are they? They're all fighting. So yes, there's many warring factions. The way I'd frame it up is there's like at least 4. So you sort of have like the Euro Davos ECB group, which I would also throw Obama, Biden, and Yellen in.
So would I.
So I think Yellen, Obama, Biden are in with the Euro Davos WEF globalist group. But I think then you have, to your point, you kind of said Wall Street. So I think Wall Street and the New York Fed, Jamie Dimon, Jerome Powell are a different faction.
Yes.
I think you have obviously Russia, China are kind of together today, but they're certainly separate. And then you have the global South, right? So you sort of have these different.
You call that latter the resentfuls, the people that have nots and are victim mindset.
I mean, victim mindsets, they don't matter because they don't do anything. They're just, all they do is whine and complain, right? So
yeah, but when they register to vote, their vote matters every bit as much as anyone else.
Yeah, but I started out by saying I don't think our vote matters that much. I don't think we have. I don't think we have a free and fair election. I said if we did have a free and fair election, I think RFK wins hands down. I don't think that's the case. So, anyway, so that's how I see that. So I agree with your take on that, and I think that's exactly what happened. And I can give you a dozen data points as to why I think that to be the case.
If you don't mind, and again, we're probably looking to getting in some trouble on YouTube. If RFK Jr. starts to get traction that you and I would probably want to see, do you think it's possible that it may not meet a good ending for him?
No, I don't think so. Well, when you say not good ending, I'm guessing you're saying like
what happened to his father and his uncle.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think they would do that. If they wanted to do that, they probably would have done it to Trump already. They don't want a martyr. People rally behind a martyr, right? They're already rallying behind Trump. Look, every time he gets another indictment, his base grows. Like, people rally behind martyrs, and so they don't want that to happen. So I would say probably not. Coming directly from the RFK's camp, if he doesn't get the DNC nod, which he most likely won't, he'll move to the independent camp, which 40% of U.S. voters register as independent.
Well, don't you think the Republicans would love that? Love that.
Yeah. So, I think, to me, I don't put a lot of time and effort into this because I'm sovereign and I just don't let it, I don't let it affect my life. This is going to play out how it's going to play out, and I'm going to pick and bob and weave and move as I see fit. Back to the second part of the question, though, you were talking about sort of like a time frame, and you're sort of talking about like this Marxist takeover. And if this happens now, what happens in 5, 6, 8, 10 years when AOC takes over and cap gains and all those? I think by the end of the decade, the world looks a lot different than it does today.
I agree.
So I think that, there's a book called The Fourth Turning, talks about these 80-year cycles. He just wrote a new book, which I haven't read yet. But we're in the fourth part of that 80-year cycle. I believe there's 80, I call them 84-year cycles. 3 times 84 is 252. So really it's the big 250-year cycle. So I told you there's like a pendulum that swings every 250 years. So the fourth turning, which is where we're right now, is the big one. And that's what we're witnessing right now, which is why the world is breaking apart. It's so crazy. I think it really started around 2016 when Trump and Brexit came into play. And so the world's breaking apart. And so I think, as I kind of said, like their system doesn't work, and so it eventually fails. So I think by the end of the decade, the world has really kind of broken down into more decentralized locations. The money system has been failed and reset. I don't see it as like another from on high. This is the new world reserve currency. It's that I just choose to use Bitcoin as my reserve, and Michael Saylor chooses to use Bitcoin as a reserve for his company, and El Salvador chooses to use for their country. And some of your listeners might still be on a gold reserve, and some might still be on a dollar reserve. And I think that's what the world looks like. But what happens is as more and more people leave the dollar, which is what's happening, they continue to lose more and more power. So I think in 10 years from now, and maybe it's my optimism shining through, but I just think the world looks a lot different. I think they start to lose a lot of their power, and we get a lot more freedom back. I think it's bad and scary over the next 5 or 6 years. I think it gets worse before it gets better. But I do think by the end of the decade, we're seeing the light.
Is the U.S. military at a high level of a tremendous global conflict too woke to win wars?
I mean, certainly you could say yes, right? I mean, you see their recruitment campaigns. Their big draw is that you can be a Navy and go spend time in a submarine with a trans person. Seems like a great pitch, right? But the reason why I would say, but then I would say it probably doesn't matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because there's a saying that says generals always prepare for the last war. Right? Generals prepare for the last war. We got attacked on the southern flank, so now let's go shore up the southern flank. There's a famous story is after I think it was World War II. They got all the planes that were shot down, and then they found out where all the bullet holes were, and then they wanted to what was it? And they wanted to patch up all the places where they got shot. And then someone's like, "Wait a minute, all those planes crashed. We should look at the planes that didn't crash, or how did it go?" Anyway. I'm telling the story wrong, but the point is they prepare for the last war. And so what do I mean by that? We're building aircraft carriers that can now be taken out by a drone.
And we have the best aircraft carriers in the world.
Yeah, but they can be taken out by a drone. So
I know. That's what I mean. And that's what China has invested and looked into. If it were to go to global conflict and war with the U.S. does have an incredible quote unquote Navy and warships. But here's what they would have to do to get closer and closer. And their counterattack measures, from what I heard, are tremendous. And then we could go into
but my point is, I don't think my point I want to get into is I don't think we fight like that. So, there's a book written about like the 5 generations of warfare that we've gone through, and like warfare generation number 1 was like me and you, let's duke it out mano a mano. Warfare number 2 was like now we have like organized armies, so that was from the Romans through like the Civil War. The 3rd generation of warfare was then industrialized armies, so that was the U.S. with their aircraft carriers and their tanks and their airplanes. The 4th generation of warfare probably started around Vietnam, and that was like guerrilla warfare, and it's like terrorism today. And now we're moving to the 5th generation of warfare. Before I talk about the 5th generation, let's go back to the 4th. So in the 4th generation of warfare, where we have guerrilla warfare, we have terrorism, etc. The U.S. has never won a war since the 3rd generation of warfare.
Yes.
So the 4th generation of warfare, we're fighting terrorism. But you see, terrorism is like in Afghanistan, we're fighting terrorist cells, but the cells don't have a central head to cut off. They're a bunch of independent, decentralized cells that don't coordinate, but they share an ideology. There's no way to beat that ideology. And so it's impossible to win. And the reason why I say that, and now we're going to the 5th generation of warfare, which is now more psychological information warfare. And so the reason why I say that is because the question that you asked is the U.S. military too woke to win another war? Well, the U.S. hasn't won a war since 3rd generation. And it's not the wokeness that bothers me. I mean, it does bother me. But the thing is that the U.S. is still trying to fight the 3rd generation of warfare by building brand new carriers. And those days are over. Now we're in the 5th, and they should be preparing for that. And to your point, China is preparing for that, and the U.S. isn't. And I mean, frankly, the proxy war that the U.S. is fighting right now is not looking very good for the U.S. It certainly didn't look good in Afghanistan, leaving with our tail tucked between our legs, and it's certainly not looking good over in Ukraine right now.
No, and to my Instagram and TikTok audience, I don't know, maybe they can motivate the troops by watching the Barbie movie. That will be a a really, really good idea. Like, it's just, you don't get me started on that one. Oh boy, I'm probably losing more viewers, getting in more trouble every day, or maybe getting more beloved by a small minority. Who knows? We shall
Yeah.
see. Kissinger traveled to Beijing to discuss, well, what? Like, what is he discussing? The possibility of war with China?
I'm no fan of Kissinger. I think he's the
In the
evil.
WEF camp?
I mean, he's just the evil architect, right? I think he's been the architect of all the evil. I mean, yes, assembling the WEF, right? I mean, he before that with the big think tanks and NGOs, the Club of Rome and the Rockefellers and all of that. So and then of course he was the professor for Klaus Schwab, before he started the EWF and et cetera. So I'm certainly no fan of him. As far as this latest visit over to Beijing, to be honest, I'm just going to say that I'm not really caught up on exactly what he did over there. So I don't have a lot to comment there.
And I think my last question, Mark, we'll save a part two for later in the year, especially as we start to head into the election and kind of how things are shaping up a little bit more. I do have to ask about FTX, SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, I'm the idiot a year and a half ago that said that this guy is whatever, the next Bill Gates. Well, actually, in some ways, he might be. But I was thinking from a more positive direction, not the negative perspective. I was very, very wrong. I almost wonder if this whole thing was propped up by maybe one of those four factions that you noted, maybe by the government, maybe by a three-letter agency. I don't know. Something's not feeling too right here. We should be a little careful. Otherwise, the talk should go on Rumble. But I don't know if you have any specific comments.
Well, certainly seeing SBF kind of let off of the campaign finance violations the other day certainly was.
Yeah, exactly.
Was a little bit telling, right? I mean, we can certainly draw opinions. I like to try to kind of stick to the facts, right? We do know that probably I'm willing to say is probably more correlation than causation, but FTX was funded right when Biden announced that he was going to run for president. FTX then became the largest donor for the Democratic Party, second largest donor for Biden, I think, behind Soros. So could FTX have been created to do that? I mean, like I said, maybe that's more correlation than causation, but we do know that he did give tens and tens of millions of dollars to the Democrats and to Biden specifically. And so that looks pretty fishy. And then, I made a video breaking all this down. So you could just search Mark Moss, SBF, FTX on YouTube and find it. And I laid out all these ties and kind of showed that potentially there could be a lot of stuff behind the scenes. But I think a couple things that really catch my eye would just one, how it was handled. Two, I knew SBF in the days before he even started FTX because I was in the crypto space for a long time. The way that he ran that in Alameda was like super shady, always was from the beginning. As we found out through bankruptcy proceedings, they had no sophistication at all. They used like Google spreadsheets and like a giant omnibus account for everything. Mm-hmm. They had like no tech, no nothing back there. It was all big lies. Like, so there's that. But I think ultimately, like I said, there's a lot of conjuncture, but the fact that he got let off those campaign violations is a pretty big tell, because like take Dinesh D'Souza, for example. He's a conservative filmmaker. He's made some really good documentaries. The one about 2,000 Mules or whatever that was pretty good, but he made one about Obama, or two about Obama, and they didn't like that too much, and they came after him, and they sentenced him to like 5 years for $20,000 of campaign finance violations. So he donated, him and his wife each $5,000, and then I guess he had some employees donate, and then he gave the employees back some money for a grand total of $20,000, and he got sentenced to 5 years. But yet SBF did $90 million for straw donors, the whole thing, and he got let off.
And now, Mark, oh, I'm sorry. You have a final comment
about that? I was going to say, and part of that is, I think one is like, is it because he was connected on the inside? That's maybe a more conspiratorial take that I don't have anything to back up. It might be more because the Democrats don't want to give back that money. and they don't want to show how dirty it was, right? So they just don't want any investigation into that. But those are certainly the facts, and you can choose to extrapolate that how you see fit.
An audience viewer has maybe what should be the last question, and you can answer it super quickly. I think it's pretty good. If you could see it by Brady, or I'll read it out loud to the audience. Mark's thoughts on the elasticity of money and how BTC, Bitcoin, will function in the future without it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brady. What I like to say is that the greatest trick the Feds ever pulled on you was, one, telling you that the money supply always has to expand, and two, asset prices going up is a good thing. Those are both lies, and I know you've been taught that your whole life, so it's very hard. This is what we call cognitive dissonance. If you believe that to be true, everything else you know is now false too. That's a lie, because just let me break it down. There's a lot more to this than I can let in a few minutes, but let me give you a couple frameworks. You don't want money. None of us want money. What we want is goods and services that money buys us. If I'm on a deserted island, dying of thirst and hunger, and I have $1 billion of cash, $1 billion of gold, $1 billion of Bitcoin, none of that matters. The guy who has a water bottle, he's the richest guy on the island, right? So first thing is we don't want money. Now, second thing is wealth is goods and services. Wealth is not money. Wealth is goods and services. Money is where our value sits until we're ready to deploy it into goods and services. And so the reason why it's important to understand that, and you see this through inflation, the reason why I understand that is basically you take all the money in the world divided by all the goods and services in the world. So when I increase the money supply, but the goods and services haven't increased, that means the value of those dollars go down. So it takes more dollars to buy those things, or the price goes up. However you want to look at that. It's an equation. So when I increase the money supply, the price of the goods and services go up, which means my cost of living goes up. So for example, in 1970, it was like a dime to buy a cup of coffee. Don't you think over the last 50 years, with all the technology and all the just-in-time supply chains that we have and all of that, it should be cheaper to get a bean from Colombia into my coffee cup today? But yet somehow coffee is $4. Coffee should have gone from 10 cents to 1 cent, not 10 cents to $4. So our life should be getting easier. And it would be if the money supply wasn't always expanding. Because remember, money is a proxy for the goods and services. So as my friend Jeff Booth says, when you have abundance in money, you have scarcity in everything else. So when you print a bunch of money, like the stimmy in 2020, supply chains broke down. When we had an abundance of money, we had scarcity in the goods and services. When you have scarcity in the money, you have an abundance in the goods and services. So if you have Bitcoin with a fixed supply, then what happens is the value doesn't accrue in the assets, the value accrues in the money. So, and I just ask people this simple question: what would you rather have? Would you rather your money buys you more goods and services in the future or less? Obviously, the answer is you want your money to buy you more goods and services. And so that's the way it would work on a fixed monetary standard. Now, people won't worry about the currency units. Okay, so the elasticity that I think you're talking about, is there enough money for everybody? Because there's only 21 million Bitcoin. But those Bitcoin can be infinitely divisible. So if I take a pizza, I could eat one pizza, or I could slice it into 2,000 pieces of pizza. It didn't change the amount of pizza. I still have one piece. It's the pieces I break it down to. So sure. So Bitcoin breaks down to Satoshi. So just like a dollar breaks down into 100 cents, a Bitcoin breaks down into 100 million sats. Very similar. But even those 100 million sats could become divisible. So we can break them down into bits. So it's infinitely divisible. So there's certainly enough currency units to be used by everybody on Earth. But we don't want the money supply to expand, because that robs us of our life. We now have to work more hours to get the same amount of goods and services we got before. So we want the money supply to be fixed and allow the value to accrue in the money, not in the goods and services.
Mark, this was great. I don't want to take advantage of your time. I greatly appreciate you. For my audience that would like to learn more about you on Twitter, which I highly recommend to follow, your books, how could they learn more?
Yeah, the last 2 months, I haven't really been tweeting a whole lot. I've been way too overactive on Twitter, and I kind of had to pull back a little bit. But just go to my website, One Mark Moss, and you can find like all my handles. I put out content across all the platforms, but different. So like if you're more into like short clips, videos, images, Instagram's the place. Obviously, Twitter is more thought directly from me. YouTube, though, I put out a couple of videos a week of like long form teaching. So if you like these types of topics where I break them down into 15, 20-minute lessons, then my YouTube, Mark Moss, is the way to go. And you just go to my website, One Mark Moss, and you can access all that.
Excellent. This has been great. Mark, I'm going to do about a 1 or 2 minute close, kind of updating my audience from myself and a little bit of ways that they can access some of my resources. It's unfair to you in terms of taking up more of your time. I greatly appreciate it. We'll definitely have you back late this year or early next year. Thank you for being a great guest. Look forward to it.
Answer this one question real quick.
Sure. Thank you.
Find the Uncommonist Manifesto. Appreciate that. Brady, what I say is that gold can certainly scale. They didn't allow gold to scale. If you want to go back and really kind of read what happened. So what happened in World War II is they printed way too much currency, or World War I, they printed way too many currency units, too much paper. And John Maynard Keynes told Churchill, look, you printed too many currency units. You have to change the price of gold. No, we don't want to do that. So they tried to go back to the same price of gold they were. That's what caused this massive depression that we had. So go back and kind of reread that. But gold could certainly scale. So like today, for example, let's say that you're a nation state. You got $100 billion. I'm not going to put that in U.S. treasuries anymore. I'm going to put that into gold. Well, there's not enough gold to do that at the current price, right? At the current price. But if gold went from 2,000 an ounce to 50,000 an ounce, well, now there's certainly enough gold to put into that. And that's what I'm talking about, where the value should be accruing in the money, not in the goods and services. So gold can certainly scale. We can buy a flake of gold, a gram of gold, a tenth of an ounce of gold, an ounce of gold, right? So you don't have to buy a bar, you can buy a flake of it. But the price would have to go up so there's enough to go around. The answer's out there for you, Brady. I don't have time to go back and forth, but the answer's out there for you. I'd recommend a book called The Bitcoin Standard. And the reason why I'd recommend this book is it's not just about Bitcoin. It actually goes back through the entire monetary system, from feathers and shells being money, all the way to how gold emerged, why gold was the best money, how gold worked. And so when you get that fundamental understanding of all of that, and then introduce Bitcoin at the end, it's written by an economist, a friend of mine, Safety, and check it out, The Bitcoin Standard. And then there's another book, if you really want to get into it, it's called Layered Money. And it goes through the whole history of money as well, going through Florence and the florin and all of that. Florence was the birthplace of the modern monetary system with the ledger system, double entry accounting. So read those two books, start with The Bitcoin Standard. And then also Mises.org has all of this stuff, Austrian economics, if you want to dig in deeper. But anyway, I'll sign it off with that.
You're so kind. Thank you for your time, Mark. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you.
Bye.
That was Mark Moss, everyone. I'm going to do about a 2 or so minute close. And thank you, Brady. You asked great questions, and I agree. Hit the like, y'all. Indeed, hit the like. So a little bit on that note, again, many of you know me for many years, being the founder of Family Office Association, globally dedicated to the family office community as a thinker, a thought leader, doing interviews, and a little bit of my YouTube platform, which I still have, my original, which is by family office standards, good size. Go and subscribe at Family Office. And a little bit like Mark said, I have a lot of different platforms. Yes, some content crosses over on all, either long form or in clips, or perhaps a duplicate, but there are nuances to each platform, and they are free. So again, from Instagram to Twitch to Rumble, which I haven't done anything yet, but go and subscribe. I guess TikTok is my same name as well. It's Angelo Robles Media. Many of you already know me on LinkedIn. We're probably on most active. That's Angelo Robles. And the two platforms on YouTube, at Family Office. And my new platform, yes, go and subscribe, like the live. We'll start to transition more and more of them to my core page as well for more audiences to see in replay. And that is simply at Family Office. So it has been wonderful for me this summer, being focused on my transition, taking that time off in the spring, recharging my batteries, and being a little bit humbled and learning some of the mistakes I made in my last year or so at Family Office Association, and how I had or liquidated my positions to the investor, who I hope does great. He's awesome. And I'm really excited about my future moving forward with my Angelo Robles Enterprises and everything under there, from my programs, my social media, the work I'll be doing on coaching, consulting, given my effectively 20 years in the community, especially with the richest of the rich, $100 million, billionaires, decabillionaires, one even at the highest level, and everything I've learned and I've done within the family office community. So these are some of the things I'll be giving back. Next week, I'll probably do something on what I've learned from interviewing 40 plus billionaires, knowing several hundred centimillionaires, mindsets and traits of their successes. And I go pretty deep. It's surveys, it's research, it's one-on-ones, it's getting to know them, smoking cigars, eating dinner, drinking, going out, a little bit of partying, a little bit of sleeping over, and really the insights that I glean and learn, being someone who's naturally very curious. Probably not the sharpest tool in the shed. And today was probably not my best from asking questions because I usually like long form, or I could really sit back, get a cigar, a good whiskey, and probably do 2 to 3 hours. And I don't know, maybe it's a Friday. Maybe that has something to do with it as well. But I do appreciate all of you being a part of this. I hope you enjoyed it. Please go and subscribe to the platforms that I noted. Go check out, probably by Sunday or Monday, the revamp of angelorobles.com. And a lot of what I'm talking about my coaching, my consulting, my membership is going to be very exclusive and very limited to really those that really want to be dedicated to really the most intense, interactive family office group that's going to be out there, period. Bar none. No questions asked from that perspective. I know what it's going to be, what me and my dream team and my network of relationships are putting together. And I'm very, very excited about it. Excited about Billionaire University and Mastermind as well. And probably the one that I think is going to be among the lowest hanging fruit for many of you. It really is the depth and intellectual horsepower of my master classes. If many of you, the most common thing I get from all of you is, I kind of know about family offices, but I don't work in one. I want to learn more. I want to learn how to work in one. I think I could take you from 0 to 100 in days. And probably the master class is going to be the best way to do that. Honestly, and I spent tens of thousands on others. I've been to others. I know pretty much everyone in the community. What I've built over multiple years, especially finalized in the last couple of months, it is the cream of the crop. It is the best on creating or reimagining a family office to be a top 1%. I put my life into it. My work on disaster prep for billionaires and effectively disaster preparedness is deep. Little parts of that were touched on today in my conversation with Mark. And the work that I'm doing with a whole bunch of AI thinkers and thought leaders and family offices on both from the investing side and operational side of family offices and AI. And that's just amazing what is happening from an investing perspective. Now would be a chance to go from a centimillionaire to a billionaire. And from an operational perspective, from working in an SFO perspective, everything is changing before our eyes. What worked even a year ago is often now outdated. It's not going to be applicable in kind of what we have now moving forward. So those master classes, which I admit are a bit of a premium, but not a crazy price, are going to be an opportunity for many of you to really, whether a principal, an inheritor, someone who simply is entrepreneurial, who wants to be quote unquote super rich or a billionaire, hopefully one day, or work within that community or service that community. The work that I put together in my one-on-ones, my coaching, my content, some of it that I give out for free here on platforms like this. But my master classes are really going to be, I think, a great way for many of you to take it the one level above the free content that I give out. And again, I'm not saying it's cheap. It's not. It's a bit of a premium. But I'm putting my reputation, my experiences, my decades in the community, who I know, who I've worked with, 20 plus family offices that I've built or redesigned. I like to say the word reimagined. And I'm basically, giving you access to all that. That will, again, literally, if you have some level of intelligence and discipline and desire and want to grind it out and learn, in a couple of days, you'll probably have more knowledge than 99% of the people out there. And give me a week or two after that, and I'll get you into the top 1% of even people that know the family office community, specifically the single family office community. And I know I've been going a little hard about my platforms and my website and all that, but I'm an excited entrepreneur. This is a great time for me. I do believe I could provide great value back to many of you. And again, go into angelorobles.com, especially let's go with Monday. Hopefully my designers and my people will have it all up by then, at least the first incarnation, and they give us a couple of weeks to tweak it a little more and a little more. But you'll know how to reach out to me. and how to, and I have dates to the master classes and all that. It's all going to be on there. Thank you all so much. Again, pardon a little bit of the overly long infomercial there at the end. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you again for your time. And again, thank Mark Moss. He was a great guest. Thank you.